So after talking to enough people in the know, I've basically gathered for you guys the two prominent front runners for the VP slot in 2024. Donald Trump is most likely to pick JD Vance, and then following that, Marco Rubio out of Florida. Of course, the news is spreading like wildfire on Twitter. It's trending now. Basically, the report is that, of course, what I just said. Now, what's interesting about this, of course, is that we have the people that spend their whole lives on Twitter giving their analysis. But first, we're going to break down the stats for this election. So first and foremost, we need to understand that JD Vance ran pretty recently, so we can read into his race, read into the details and the margins, and to see who is going to help Trump the most win 24 and some other presiding details. We also have the election between Marco Rubio and Val Demings from 2022 in what used to be a swing state known as Florida. Now, interestingly enough, these margins are super different. As we both know, Donald Trump won Florida by about 3% in 2020, and he won Ohio by almost 10%. Now, why is that interesting? Because when you look at 2022, which was a favorable year for Republicans, or at least should have been, you see that J.D. Vance is going against a strong, well-funded Democrat. He beat Tim Ryan by about 6.1%. With the full Trump endorsement, etc., he underperformed Trump by about 4%. Interesting. Now, looking at Val Demings versus Rubio, we see that Rubio won the state by about 16. That being said, DeSantis won it by like 19. So these are what we're looking at. So, Marco Rubio outperforms Trump, but you can't really take much because Val Demings was a no-name. By no-name, I mean she wasn't really relevant holistically, as well as, Rubio is a very, he's all right. But Vance, on the other hand, underperforms against a strong opponent, so we have to look at what exactly is going on here. Now, in 2016, if you look at the election before that, Rob Portman destroys Ted Strickland. But you have to understand that this was a nonpartisan election. It was really, it's really weird because on one hand, you have an election with a moderate Republican such as Portman against a Democrat like Strickland, who used to be, I think, governor. And it's a little complicated because, of course, the Republican wins by a lot, but Trump won it by way less. So that's an interesting phenomena in this election. Anyway, let's look at some angles from these people that are perennially on Twitter. So right away, you'll notice this guy, Paul Villarreal, says that Vance is Mr. Appalachia, could help in the Rust Belt and his impeachment insurance. So basically bailing out Trump if he gets impeached. Rubio, on the other hand, is Latino outreach as a positive, likely will get more donor money, no impeachment insurance, and he's more like an establishment Republican and an olive branch to those Republicans. Now, what's interesting about this, of course, is that Vance as Mr. Appalachia isn't true. Now, he has a book called Hillbilly Elegy that got adopted into a Netflix movie, which is pretty good. That being said, though, he doesn't come off as like blue collar, and he definitely didn't grow up that way. He grew up poor, but he immediately left that as soon as possible. In fact, I think he became a Yale law student immediately, which is not really Appalachian, which is good because that place sucks anyway. But beyond that, he married an Indian woman, named his kid Vivek. So, I mean, is he going to really resonate with the blue collar vote? Not really. And honestly, Donald Trump, who is like the opposite of blue collar, is in fact more appealing to those people in Ohio. Evidently, he did better in 2020 in that race than did J.D. Vance. Now, you could offer an opposition, and you could say that Tim Ryan is a better candidate to go against insofar as he's more difficult than is Joe Biden. But we have to really see in 24 if that bears true. Insofar as Marco Rubio is concerned, will he get Latino outreach? That's doubtful, because if you look at the guy's track record, he's only been a Cuban American in Miami for a while, of course. But here's the thing. That Latino vote in Cuba, and what I mean is like basically people from Cuba going to Florida, that vote would have mattered in 2000, 2004, 8, 12. But see, the thing is that it doesn't matter. The Cuban vote is only relevant holistically in Florida. Those people are already 50 to 60% Republican. Whereas with the Democrat vote, we're looking at Mexicans that we need to appeal to, not Puerto Ricans, which are mostly in New York, not Dominicans, not Brazilians in Massachusetts. We're talking about Mexicans in places like Texas, places like Arizona in particular. And so to have a Rubio on the ticket with helping Latinos, is that really the true case? Is that really going to happen? So I spent a good 20 minutes looking for polls on the approval ratings of said candidates because obviously they won both of their seats decently in 2022. And even prior to that, Marco Rubio won in 2016, in 2010. But we have to understand that these things don't exist. So you need somebody who's a genius to just recall on their memory of who's going to be more popular and kind of extrapolate from that. And so Marco Rubio had a promising career up to a certain point. So he was this like Obama contemporary, somebody who was in the same age bracket, but removed by like a decade, of course. And what I mean is that Obama was in his late 40s in 2008. And Rubio was in his 40s in 2016. He went on to get trounced by Trump, and they had their own beef, which is interesting because, of course, if it gets picked as a VP, it's going to be awkward. You have a guy in Rubio who earnestly thought that Donald Trump shouldn't have been the president in 2015, fought against him in the primary, got like third place and lost. The thing is with him, of course, is that there's a resentment there that he had to kiss the ring. That in fact, when he was president and you were Senator Marco, you had to kiss that ring and say, this guy's an idiot, orange buffoon, and yet I still had to kiss the tuchus. And that's pathetic. And when you're looking at that, will Donald Trump really respect him as a person? And so if he really doesn't, which he probably won't, then we're looking at somebody who might be picked out of expediency because he might help with the Latino vote. But as I said a couple minutes ago, the Latino vote is a kind of contentious thing, of course, because most of the Latinos that matter are in swing states, and most of those Latinos are Mexicans. So about 19% of the country is Latino, but only about 11% out of that 19 is Mexican. So like 2/3 of it. This guy's Cuban, a light skin. Is that really going to appeal to Mexicans in particular? The answer is not really. It's going to marginally help a little bit because, of course, the name Rubio is cool. And you could say that it's a little bit diversity and like brown, but like in a good way for white people. And I get that. But at the same time, you have to realize that it doesn't really matter. It doesn't. And so when we're looking at that other thing, what else does he provide? Well, establishment votes. Why? Because he's more conservative in a traditional sense than Trump? Not really. And when we're looking at experience, that's the thing that he does have in spades over JD Vance. Now, both of these guys are seen as younger than Trump, which is fine because Rubio's like 50 and Vance is in his 30s. And that's important because somebody like Carson might ding Trump in a way that's very subtle in that you have two guys on a ticket that are old, whereas with Biden Kamala, at least Kamala is not going to die of Alzheimer's, which is interesting, of course. Now, that being said, we do have a candidacy, which is difficult because on one hand, we have a guy who obviously was openly anti-Trump in 2016 in Rubio, but then you have a guy who was also counter-signaling Trump in 2016 and endorsing Obama and saying that he was so smart and whatnot in Vance. And that's kind of pathetic because will Trump really trust these people? Because again, the guy's been betrayed so many times, has been ostracized by people in his own party. And so now he has a MAGA cult, so to speak, which is fine because he needs that because people that don't fall into that clearly try to subvert him every time. And so when it comes down to it, none of these guys had his back in 2016. And is he going to weigh these people as like valuable people to have side to side? The answer is only if they provide a lot electorally. Vance provides virtually nothing. He is a good speaker insofar as he's articulate, but he doesn't have charisma. He has a fat face. And frankly, when you're looking at it, he's solid on the issues, but how much does Trump really care about the issues? I think it's more of a question of who's going to succeed him as the father-son dynamic in the company and not so much how much he can trade on the stock market, okay, if you know what I mean? So much of national conservatism, which is heralded by people like Josh Hawley, people like JD Vance, is contingent on people being very fixated on the policies and the particulars. But Donald Trump is the opposite. He's a guy who operates off of loyalty, off of gut instinct, and street smarts, which neither of the two people that are suggested to be VP really have. And so that's why I have a big problem with this. Okay, so again, I want Ben Carson to be vice president, but it seems like either of these two are going to be picked. Let's look into the credentials of each in particular. So we're going to look through a big list of stuff to see who we're going to pick. So in particular, we're going to start off the bat with Vance because he's got the shorter track list. So when we're looking at this guy, he is 39 years old and he's got 3 kids. So again, family man, that's a good look. Now, his wife, on the other hand, very unusual. Her name is Usha Chikuri. I mean, so you can do with what you will with that. Now, he has education from Ohio State, the Ohio State, and Yale University. So when it comes to this, you might ask yourself, well, what about the military service? So he didn't see action from what I can tell, but he was in the Iraq War, technically. And so that's a good thing to have on the ticket. Of course, a veteran, people have a soft spot for them. You know, maybe he can speak about the VA despite not being injured himself, but maybe that could be something. Now, when we look at the credentials, again, nothing much here. But when we look at his education, again, he went to Yale, which is very establishmentarian. I don't think Trump really likes that in particular, but we'll see. Now, when we're looking at his accomplishments, he has a book. Now, the book is good. I liked it. The movie's also great. But is it very much a popular phenomenon in the culture? Like, I get it. If you made the Hunger Games, people would know what that is. But Hillbilly Elegy, I don't think it's a big thing. But anyway, this is a very fascinating thing. In 2017, Vance joined an investment firm founded by the founder of AOL, the co-founder here. So he's been plugged into this industry for almost a decade. Okay, so he's got, ever since his early 30s, he's been in the corporate world, which is interesting. Now, in 2017, he became a CNN contributor at the back of the Hillbilly Elegy, which is interesting. So he was completely kosher and cool with the establishment when it was convenient. When he wanted to get the Hillbilly Elegy book out and the Netflix documentary or whatever have you, he was okay with it. In fact, he was endorsing Obama, or at least like co-signing him, saying he was so smart and that people that hated him were racist because he's so smart. Other BS like that. And so you have to look at a guy who made a political transformation as of the last 7 years. But in particular, that is of note because, again, Rubio was always Republican for decades and he hated Trump personally, but he was conservative. Whereas with Vance, he didn't like Trump and was liberal until somewhat recently. And it's a problem when you're liberal in your 30s, whereas most people will say he was young and it's a cop out. Well, Vance was liberal 15 years older than I am currently, and I'm conservative now. So that brings into question how solid he is on the issues when he's only converted relatively recently. That's the question. That being said, here's some evidence that JD Vance might be the pick over Marco Rubio. In 2019, Vance is known for co-founding Naira Capital in Cincinnati with the financial backing of Peter Thiel, Eric Schmidt, and Mark Anderson. Well, what is this? Eric Emerson Schmidt is a former software engineer who served as the CEO of Google for 10 years, okay? So you have a guy who basically founded Google or was the CEO for a decade, 20 years ago, and endorsed and worked in a big thing with Vance. So he's starting a capital firm in Cincinnati off the back of Peter Thiel, who is a known conservative big billionaire who happens to be gay, and he's in that Elon Musk crowd and is also hand in parcel with the Yoram Hazony National Conservative branch of Republican thought. Isn't that interesting? And then we have Eric Schmidt, who again was part of Silicon Valley. And how conservative can you be if you are in Silicon Valley to the high capacity of CEO of Google as recently as 2011? And again, he was completely cool with these people, which makes you think that is how hard right can a guy be? And again, this is only a selling feature to the people in the niche part of the internets that I'm from, where of course we want somebody who's super conservative and not somebody who's going to be just down the line sellout. And now the question becomes that we have a guy under 40 who could be the perennial successor to Trump in 2028 and have the endorsement of him implicitly being the vice president for 4 years and with the funding of all these billionaires. And you might ask yourself, is he going to really be MAGA, so to speak? Now, to bring it back to the election, people might say, don't worry about 4 years down the line. Let's think about 2024. Let's think about who's going to help Trump win the presidency. Well, as we know, Rubio is a little more just popular with most people. Most people would be more comfortable with him being vice president than would be with JD Vance. The reason being is that at least when it comes to Trump, and you have to look at how the CNN and the MSNBCs of the world are going to spin this. We've got in Rubio somebody who has been a Republican for decades, has been in office for several years, has the bona fides to say like, okay, I know how to run stuff in case Trump dies. Whereas CNN's going to say JD Vance has no clout, had to suck up to Trump, even though he hated him before to become senator in Ohio, and then has all these shady investors plugged into his campaign. And so there's a big question as to how the media is going to spin this. Because again, we're trying to win independence, and a lot of them watch the media nowadays. Now, when it comes to this, JD Vance, again, might be used as a foil against Trump to say like, bro, you literally are being an opportunist. You became a senator not even 2 years ago, and now you're going to jump wagon to be Trump's VP. It seems like a power grab, and there's no shame in that. Of course, I endorse that. Josh Hawley's a ladder climber. We get it. I respect it. I would do the same thing. The question is, how dedicated are you to the cause, so to speak, is what people are going to ask JD. The answer he's going to give is probably not going to be the most compelling because the facts are not on his side. I mean, clearly, if you're a fan of Obama in your 30s, bro, you need some counseling. And look, there's forgiveness in everybody, even in theoreticals. We have to look at who is going to be a better candidate in 24. And, JD doesn't bring anything to the table. At best, he'll be a Trump surrogate who's younger, and therefore the people that say, oh, Trump's old, maybe that'll lift up Trump's value as a presidential ticket combo with him. But that's a very far in between sort of demographic that you need to appeal to. When it comes to suburban people, he doesn't have any more appeal than Trump does, just that he probably isn't as vulgar, but nobody cares because he doesn't have the charisma. So again, when we're talking about Trump is bad in the suburbs, Trump is so unappealing to women, you need somebody who is not going to be offensive, but also as charismatic. Thus far, there's no candidate that is on that level, okay? So at the presidential level, at the federal level, there's no politician that has the charisma of Trump while also not being as controversial. It doesn't exist. It's mutually exclusive. JD Vance is also somebody who has the positions of Donald Trump right now without the track record of supporting it long term, which mind you, Trump doesn't have that either, but he's already been the president, so that doesn't matter. And so it's a bigger question of who you're going to endorse in the fixture of this election. And right now, a swing voter is not going to be swayed by JD Vance unless he thinks age is a big issue and he's already going to vote Republican. That's it. Rubio, on the other hand, is a little different because he is 10 years older, but is also Latino. So there's a little bit of an externality that he might help in Arizona and whatnot. And perhaps in 2016, he would have done better in places like Arizona against Hillary, being a generic Republican with a Latino surname, which we love. But anyway, let's get into the Marco Rubio track list, the track record. And if you're still watching, like the video and comment down below because I don't get enough comments. Okay, I need to read more. Frankly, I will respond to all of them that are worthwhile. Okay, but like the video. This is the most niche content possible. I'm the only one in the trap, in the trenches, so to speak, doing this. But we have Marco Rubio, born 1971, Marco Antonio Rubio, from Miami, a spouse. Okay, let's see what she looks like. He's been married for 25 years, which is really impressive, honestly. They're the same age, 4 kids. She's got the good look. Okay, good. Perfect. Now, that's better already than Vance, by the way. 1 more kid than Vance and a more conventional wife, a Latina wife. We love it. Okay, now looking at this, he was in the West Miami Commission as young as about 26 years old. So he's been a career politician. We acknowledge that. But again, career politician means career experience. So he's got 25 years in public office to some degree. JD Vance has less than 2. Okay, so when we're selling this thing to Trump, to the average voter, how is this going to work out? Okay, you could say, Trump picked a guy who's 50 years old, so he still has decades to be in politics, but also has been in politics for decades. Or we got a guy in JD Vance who's been in politics for less than a decade and has also have been in contradictory positions in less than 10 years. And beyond that, only has 2 years in the Senate in which he's accomplished jack and shit. Okay, so looking at that, it doesn't look good. Now, looking at the track record here, member of the Florida House of Representatives from the 111th District for 8 years straight. So that's good experience as well. In a swing state, by the way. 2000 to 2008, contentious era for Florida politics. He was in it. Speaker of the House from 2006 to 2008. Again, another big note is that he was the Speaker of the House. So when he's being asked to arbitrate different things in the Senate as President of the Senate, theoretically as Vice President, he would already have the experience. So you can see how it's already being sold to the people. Now, Senate Intelligence Committee, he was the chair of that for about a year. Senate Small Business Committee, he was in that for another 2 years. Okay, now he's been a senator since 2011. He's got 13 years of experience, won 3 elections. That's somewhat impressive. Now, let's look at how he is electorally, because again, JD Vance only has one election to his name, so we can't read too much into that. But looking at 2016, where Trump barely won the state, Rubio won it by 7. Again, that's a great look. It was a strong swing state, by the way. So Rubio won that by a lot, and that's really cool. Now, mind you, 2010, this was a race that was pretty favorable to Republicans because you had a 3-way race, and Rubio still held the fort, winning it by 20%. He won 49 out of versus 29 versus 20, so that's interesting. But as you see there, Rubio started out as a Tea Party Democrat. I'm sorry, Tea Party Republican. So on the farther right extreme, so to speak, of the mainstream Republican consensus, but has kind of gravitated to the center. So the guy has a legacy of going wherever the wind blows, which in case of Trump is convenient because he's the hegemon of the Republican Party. So he's willing to kiss the ring as long as he gets power. So with Rubio, you have a track record of solid Republican votes. He's been pretty good on most of the things. Of course, he was part of the 10 people that started the 2013 immigration amnesty deal, which was freaking terrible under the Obama administration. But if we sweep that under the rug, we have a guy in Rubio who has been in the thick of it for a while and has a track record for it. Whereas with Vance, we don't have this. So to wrap up the video, this is the way that I see Trump doing this decision. I think that Trump thinks that basically we have a guy here who is more conservative than the other one, that's JD, with less experience, less of a track record. Both of the guys hated you at a point in their adulthood, and that must piss Trump off. And so he's in a difficult position if he's really choosing between these two. I think he would lean towards Rubio in this case because he's got more stuff going for him electorally than does Vance. And I think also that he would like Vance in the Senate more than Rubio. I think that he's a stronger vote. And so just logistically, I see it better that way. Plus, if you had to give, and this is how it works in the Senate, okay? So let's say Trump wins and Rubio resigns. So basically there's an open Senate seat. The governor gets to pick who the senator is until the next election. Okay, well, would you rather have Rubio be replaced by a DeSantis person, which would be a strong Republican in my opinion, or would you rather have Mike DeWine, who's a known rhino cuck with glasses? Okay, so would you rather have Mike DeWine in Ohio replace JD Vance with somebody else? No, you would want DeSantis to have that vote. So looking at it in a multitude of different ways, I would say that in like 80% of cases that Rubio helps Trump more in the election in 24 than does Vance. And so I think that Trump will know that and obviously knows better than me And I think that he will probably pick Rubio over Vance, even though the people that I've spoken with that are more tied into this national conservative wave will probably be felted. I think that they're going to actually be wrong. And I think that Vance is going to stay in the Senate and, stew and sit there. And maybe in 28, he'll have a shot at it. But until then, I think it's going to be Rubio, Trump 2024. And until then, we're going to see if I'm right. I think that Rubio increases Trump's odds of winning by like maybe 2%. And what I mean by 2%, I mean like, let's say Trump's odds of winning right now are like 60-40 pro. I think it might go to 62-38, and that's not insignificant, but also not the end of the world either way. So I don't think Trump is going to lose or win the election on the predicate of who he picks for VP, but it's still an important decision nonetheless, of course. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and as well, you want to like the video because, of course, we love our likes here. So we'll see y'all in the next video. Adios.